What does it even mean? Like, let's start with that. Like, the basics, like just the fundamentals.
Yeah, the
Is the
fundamental
definition?
of a flexible scope and fixed time, and how opposite it is to the common practice in our industry.
Yeah. Yeah, like basically what we're saying is like we're going to get some version of this thing done, roughly something like this. And we're going to give it exactly this amount of time. And so you start and then it's at the end it's pencils down.
Yeah, a lot of the roots come from this overused term of agile development.
Yeah.
And like what's the flavor and process that we run by that actually make these very successful.
I mean, fundamentally, it's about building the right thing faster, building something where there's always check-ins about is this useful or valuable to the customer, to the user. We're going to start doing something and this day, and then we're going to stop doing something like 6 weeks later. Like that's exactly when it's going to happen. And the thing that I think is so different about it that people ought to understand is like there's never been an industrial automation development project that behaved that way, where it actually finished when it was supposed to finish. And usually they're longer, like there's other things like that, but it's like, that's really how it works. Like it's pencils down at the end of week 6, but then it's like, okay, but we're not, are you done yet? Or like, how are you ever finished? You're not finished yet. It's like, well, there really is something finished. It's just, we scope it flexibly. So there's like enough of an understanding of what needs to take place so that when you get to that finish, you can put your pencil down, having made the appropriate trade-offs. Like that's really what it means to fix the time and make the scope something that you can make trade-offs or choices about in the middle of the sprint. As a point of contrast to, we've got like what people would call more like a waterfall approach, where it's like fixed bid, fixed time. Like we just know in reality, like it's really impossible to actually achieve.
In the terms of like estimates on those like waterfall methods, like what's considered successful in this day and age? Like,
Yeah.
I've experienced if you're 100% off, like it went twice as long as you thought it was, and you're still not done. Like
That's actually a pretty good estimate, I think.
That
if
would be
you're only
considered
off by
like
2x.
that fits in with typical safety margins that people apply to their budgeting efforts.
Yeah.
Of like, yeah, it's going to cost 6 months and it's going to cost this much, so let's charge them for a whole year versus taking it 6 weeks at a time. And taking it 6 weeks at a time, you're building the right thing at the right step. And then you're also paying for the least amount of work possible, because like you're paying for what you actually need and not paying for safety margins.
I think what people would stand the benefit to most to learn about is the idea of flexible scope, because I think people have this expectation like, well, it's got to get done. There's just like this known amount of work, and it's like that's not actually how it works in real life. Like when you get into it, you find all this complexity. You find out you end up needing to make all these trade-offs. There's this sort of myth that there's like a known amount of work to do, or a known of what it is. And like, so much of what we're doing is this like discovery process, like even stuff that's been done a lot of times before, like you're always learning stuff along the way. We're not taking that, that estimate and like blocking it into 6 weeks. It's like we're building it step by step. Yeah. And each time there's a check-in where it's like that feature was worth that amount of money to that degree. When you can feel that deadline and you're like, we need to get this, we're only 3 weeks out to the finish, like you start having to make difficult decisions about, can we get 80% of the value with the 1 week that we have left? And that might be a good trade-off because you'll still hit your budget, right? Like when was the last time you heard any automation project hit its budget? Like it's just unheard of. Like, and so I think that's where that flexibility in the scope and that ability to like bring it in and make those trade-off decisions, like again, they can be really difficult decisions, but you can make those decisions. Like in a fixed bid project, it's like, it's just got to get done no matter how long it takes.
Yeah, coming from a developer background, is like how many features in my lifetime under waterfall methods that I've built that have like never been actually used is ridiculous.
Yeah, no, that's a whole other.
Because it also brings some pride. It's like I have a lot of pride in this feature and it doesn't get touched, and I spent like 6 weeks on this feature and nobody even used it. But like, given that like I need this feature, here's 6 weeks of time. Like, that feature is going to be well loved and cherished, and like really orient that machine towards being successful.
We work in a client context. We do our own internal sprints, but we're often working for clients. And when there's a fixed bid, like you sign the fixed bid contract, and if you're delivering all your everything that you're doing from that moment forward is focused on getting that final release signature, and trying to get out of like trying to either change order arguments or like, can this please just be good enough? Like all you're doing is focusing on that. You're not focusing on building the right thing. You're focusing on like, did we build what was in the 50-page Word document? And really that sets up like a really adversarial relationship between sort of like someone who's supplying something or creating something for a client, and like all I care about is a signature. And when we're building in a flexible scope context, we can be like, look, it's your time to spend. Like, do we want to do X or Y? Like it's your, we can decide that together instead of and be aligned about it, instead of sort of like fighting over whether it's a change order or like, no, you'll definitely do it because that's what the scope said. It's like the scope doesn't make sense at this point.
Embrace the pivot towards the right solution.
And the alignment, right? It's like we can decide that together. It's like we're not fighting over when the end of the sprint date is. Like the sprint is over on June 14th, like period, right? Like we've already decided that. Like this is definitely what's going to happen. And it's like with the time that we have left, do we want to do this or that? Like that's something that I feel like really empowers clients and puts us more on the same side of the table about like what could we deliver at this point that's going to be really valuable, and like involving all the complexities and trade-offs instead of just being like, no, do it or else, or like do it and blow your date, or do it and blow your budget, or do it in death march and never stop. Like, it's really a big difference, and it really changes the collaboration. It changes what it's like to work on those.
There's so much well-intentions at the beginning when you're scoping this 6 month or the 6 month, 12 month, 18 month type projects, that it's like, this is how it needs to go. Like we have this all planned out. But then you get into like, say it takes another 6 months before that budget gets released. New technology's out, new things are changed, new solutions are out. Like say B&R has a new library that fixes this problem. It's like, okay, that's no longer an 18-month project. That's a 12-month project because this giant portion of it's tested and it's open software at that point.
Another reason that I think deadlines are valuable. Like deadlines are insanely valuable. Like I feel that because like as a developer on projects, I'm always like excited. In fact, I always just need a little bit more time because I'm almost there. And it's like if I had $1 for every time I had said that myself or heard it from somebody else, it's like, no, you will be done on this date. And like it's like, okay, I need to make some hard decisions, or like maybe it doesn't live up to like what the vision I had in my head of what it would be, but it actually is finished, and it was only worth working on it for 6 weeks. It's not worth chasing after to the end of the year. Like if it was going to cost that much, we never would have pursued it, right? Like we never would have gone.
It never would have went through purchasing and prioritized. Food's ready.
Hell yeah.
Those look awesome.
This is real life. Actually, this is where we would go for lunch.
I know this is right on par.
This is really good.
And I got the hamburger too. But
This reminds me of the concept of appetite. I think that's where there's like, okay, just 4 words. It's like fixed time, flexible scope. And you're like, cool, that sounds easy. Can I just do that? And you're like, well, there's actually a lot of, I don't know, do you call it art or do you call it skill to like, how do you make a flexible scope? Like what is that's right.
There's a lot of very deliberate steps in the whole system that allows us to be really successful at doing those sprints that aren't just like, all right, I'm going to do the same thing in a waterfall method, but like just reset the clock every 6 weeks.
I heard somebody talk about, so they're going to do the 100-meter dash. We're just going to fire the firing gun every 100 yards. That'll be how we do sprints. It's like, no.
It all starts with like framing the problem, figuring out exactly what we're going to attack in the next sprint, what is important to the company and not necessarily what is important to the engineer that found a rabbit hole. So once you have that like high level frame, then you can start, we call it shaping. It's designing the SOW, the scope of work. It's not figuring out what we're going to do for the next 18 months and like writing sentence format of what the code is going to look like.
Been there.
But it's just enough meat there to allow the right solution to be built, but also put guidelines into what's going to be worked on in the next weeks.
What happens is like when you tell somebody like you have 6 weeks, no matter how badly it goes, like it's only 6 weeks that's lost. Like that's like the limit. That's the stopgap. Worst possible outcome is like We completely screwed up that sprint and it was a complete waste. It was only 6 weeks. It's actually like an incredibly important risk mitigation technique. If things go completely wrong, like the limit of the downside is 6 weeks. And if it goes well, good, like let's do another one, let's do another one, let's do another one. But at any point, like the worst downside, the biggest possible loss is 6 weeks, which is really, really important, both as like someone who's betting, right? I'm spending time and money and company resources to develop this stuff. Like I know that the worst loss that I could do is like only that amount. And that's like, it's totally doable compared to like infinite budget, right? It's just like, you know, like there's no bottomless pit, right?
Yeah,
like,
you're not going to be walking out of Caesars in Las Vegas with a second mortgage. Yeah, there's some great analogies of like software development. It's like creating a long estimate is more like, all right, how long is it going to take you to ride your bike across country?
Yeah.
Like, you don't really know. Like, yeah, you can say I'm going to ride at 11 miles per hour and I'm going to do this, but like, what happens if you get a flat tire? But if you start getting, I want to go from California to Nevada, like that starts getting easier. And it's like, I'm still headed eastward across the US, but like I'm making progress and I can hit these milestones that are a lot more achievable. And then you also can adapt as like Zion National Park's here. This is going to be massively useful.
Let's swing
for my experience across country. Like let's swing by here and like make it worthwhile while we're here.
Yeah, totally.
All right.
Cheers, man.
Cheers.
Thanks for coming to lunch.